Thank you, Pat. So if you were a student or a staff member during the 1960s, could you please wave, whistle, or shout? 1960s, let's hear from you. All right. There, in the house, thank you. If you were a student or staff member during the 1970s, could you please shout? It's getting louder. This is good. Next up is a distinguished gentleman who was introduced to me last week as Mr. All Things Martial Athletics Go-To Guy. He was hired to teach business in 1970, liked martial, and decided to stay for the next 30 years until he retired in 2000. Ken coached all sports, including 3 varsity sports for 8 consecutive years. He coached the Marshals women's basketball to back-to-back state championships, continues to advocate for martial athletes to be inducted into the PPS Hall of Fame, and finished his career as athletic director. Joining Ken will be Tom Hewitt. Tom has taught social studies at Marshall for the last 25 years, coached football and basketball for 13 years. Known to many as the voice of Portland State University Vikings for football and basketball, Tom coached golf for 25 years. Please welcome Ken Trapp and Tom Hewitt.
I need to clear up one thing before we start. Somebody on K103 this morning said that there was a party here till 3 and then a party at Trapp's at 4. A couple things. I wasn't on the radio till 8 this morning, and 2, there would never be a party at Trapp's house.
Not if there's a party. How many parties at Trapp's house? Hey, I want to welcome everybody here. I want to acknowledge Dr. Petrikin as head of all of us in athletics and everything, and the other person, administrator, I think has been so important to Marshall High School as an institute to the school is Vince Pesky. Vince was all your friends when you were going to school. When you were in trouble, he took care of you. I'll guarantee you. There was a lot of you who were in trouble. Okay, I just like to go. I'm going to do the up to about the 1990s. I'm going to take care of you old folks. I'm still young. I'm going to try to do the best job I can. I'm going to miss people. I'm sorry about that, but I'm going to do the best I can. We're going to talk about football first. The M-Man. If you're an M-Man football player, give me the M-Man chant. If you don't know what that was, you didn't play for Coach Everett. All right, we had Coach Everett. He was the grandfather of athletics at Marshall High School. He has passed away since. He was #1 in my book, and I'm sure in most of your book. He was one of the greatest coaches ever, and he led Marshall High School. When you went into that gym for the first assembly every year, his red hats walked in there with their hats on, and by the time you left that gym, I don't care if you're on the team or not, you were ready to play. Along with him in football, his cohorts, Bill Smithers, who recently passed away. Bill Smithers. There was Jack Monahan. There was Charlie Lehman. Jim McAllister. Monty Rury. Max Lane. And a slug of others with John Hughes, and even I work with him every once in a while. Basketball, start out, back in the first, Ray Odell, the best basketball team Marshall ever had. I'm going to have to fight you for this, but it was 1963. I can name the starters. It was Tom Reese, Galloway, Johnson, Stan Colch, and Nate Jones. Not Nate Jones. You know what I mean. He was only all-state. Best basketball team. The reason they lost the state championship, Johnson broke his arm. Okay, we had baseball, again, led by #1, Vince Pesky, followed by Al Simpson, and then Mike Doty, and I know there was more. Wrestling, I don't know the first guy that did the first year, but Bill Smithers took over and was one of the finest wrestling coaches this city has ever seen. After Bill retired from wrestling, his cohort took over and spent about 25 years. That was Monty Rury. And working with him, Charlie Lehman. I remember one time Charlie Lehman's freshman group, they wrestled somebody and their score was 96-0. Volleyball. First state champions for Marshall High School as a team was Rod Jones, volleyball. And Dorothy Cobb and Renee Schumann on that team. And then his cohort, John Hughes. And John Hughes took over the program and took second in state. Track, all you tracksters, first track coach, Jack Monahan. Then there was Don Francine. And then there was Max Lane. And basketball, first coach, Ray Odell. Second coach, Don Francine, Don Emery, and then Tom Hewitt, plus others. Girls basketball, John Hughes, Ken Trapp. And then it went on to Carol Gwing, and then it went on to everybody. Then two people I'd like to recognize from the PE department that were so important to women's athletics. There wasn't a lot of sports for them when they were at their prime. Was Mary Hamilton and Fran Bird. Teams that I like to remind you of: volleyball 1977, third in state; 78, first in state; 87, second in state, and there's a couple other seconds. Girls basketball, state champions, 1981, 26-0. 1982, they repeated. Boys basketball, I already told you, 1963. There was a real good Don Emery team with McCormick and Atkinson. I don't know what year. Football, 1970, semis at state under Coach Everett. 1971, quarterfinals. That was Everett, Smotherston, Monahan. Semifinals in 1973. Wrestling team, and it was tough to get a place in the state. In 1972, fourth in state. I was an assistant coach, I was the gopher. Track, city champions in 1972. Dual meet champions, 1972. Soccer, girls, 1982. The biggest upset in girls soccer to date. Marshall 3, Lake Ridge 2. I'd like to mention a couple of people who are very important to athletics, and that would be the first athletic director, and he was a stable person in this place. If you back in those days, if you didn't know him, you heard him, and that was Ralph Harper. After Ralph Harper, Larry Benz went for a year, and our AD, 20-some years after that, retired as AD, did one great job, was Charlie Lehman. I'm not going to go much further except that, how many football players are in the crowd? How many people know the song we sang after every football game? Yeah. You remember that one? Step in the middle if you're proud to be a football player, and I want to hear the song. Step right in there, let's go. And I'll tell you, the girls' basketball team, Copycat, you step in there too, and I want to hear the song. I want anybody who knows it to join in. This happens after every football game. This was what it was all about. No, I want to hear it. Wait for the boys, wait for everybody.
We are Minutemen, mighty, mighty Minutemen. Everywhere we go, people want to know. We've been there, baby, we've been there.
Well, I'll tell you, that's what Coach Everett was all about. He made football players singers. I'm going to pass it on. I'm good to about the 90s, and I'm not had it. I can't keep up with you guys. So Tom Hewitt will take from here, and thanks for coming. And there is a party in my house afterwards, but I think I moved.
Thank you, Ken. I came in 1986, and if you can imagine this, Chris and Pat I worked with during my academic hours, and then I was turned loose on the likes of Monty Rory, Ken Trapp, Charlie Lehman, Rod Jones. It was quite a crew, as you know, at that time. A couple administrators I would like to acknowledge. Bob Wilson, who was instrumental in hiring a lot of us, has passed away. Gary Earl came to Marshall with a love of athletics, and he inspired the program to continue on. And then your own, Paul Cook, went from being a teacher with me to being my boss and did a great job as an administrator, carrying on that Marshall tradition, and now is at Cleveland High School. John Wilhelmy is here today. He is the man who was instrumental in taking us to small schools, and we appreciate all of his efforts. As we moved into the 90s, things became quite a bit different, as Marshall was much smaller than the school used from the 60s and 70s, remember, but there's still great coaches and great teams here. I want to acknowledge I inherited the greatest golfer in Marshall High School history, Paul Hansen Jr., a two-time city champion and a guy who also won the amateur for the state of Oregon. Baseball teams, I think of Tim Taylor, who is with us today. He led teams to city championships in 95, 96, and 2000. Softball continued on, 86, 89, and 88. And the football program regained their tradition with Mark Brandenburg at the helm. Those students who are here, I'm sure each of you could get up here and tell many stories about Coach Brandenburg. But leading Marshall to city titles in 90 and 92. Ray Pozeski, another Marshall student, went on to be the head football coach here at Marshall. He should be acknowledged. The cheerleading program at Marshall High School has gone to great heights, and they have finished as high as fourth in the state in cheerleading. And as we have moved to small schools, the victories statewide have not been as big, but there have been many city championships, and we have tried to keep the pride that all of those who came before us have had. So this is my last year at Marshall High School. Very sad to see the school going, and very thankful for the chance to be here, and appreciate all of you being here today. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry, but we thank you all for coming.
I just want to say one last thing, man, is that I was here for 30 years, and I'll tell you, in my young life, that's I couldn't have had a better 30 years. I gave a darn about this place. I know you kids, we were the toughest kids in the Southeast. One quick story. When we went to Wilson High School, what we used to say, we're going to go play the rich kids on the hill. And then Coach Everett always said, when we came back from Lincoln or Wilson or someplace, we're driving by Cleveland High School coming up Powell, and he'd always get up there in the bus and he'd say, we're back in the Southeast. So don't forget your roots. Let's get after it. She wanted me to remind you that every time we played a team, when we were practicing and we weren't hustling, we always tell them, hey, when we're going to play Franklin or somebody, they walk at Franklin, we hustle. Okay, let's get after it, everybody. Have a great day!